This video contains spoilers, secrets, Easter eggs, references, all the deep cuts you could possibly want for Pokemon Legends ZA. I've done this for every Pokemon game in the past, but Legends ZA has more secrets and references than any other game. Thanks to the wonderful help of my community, we have found over 150, and for the true fans of secrets and Easter eggs, I've got a big announcement a little bit later on in the video. And our very first secrets are hidden on the opening platform of the game before you even get into the city. This place is so secret you'll never be able to return here. It's a limited area, so chatting to every NPC was paramount for me. And what they all say is that they've come from the Lumiose airport and that it's been a long travel, 13 hours in fact. This tells us a lot about where our character might be from, assuming they've come from the same airport and perhaps even from the same flight. Because a 13-hour flight away from Paris, France, the inspiration for Lumiose City, of course, would be Japan, and any of the Japanese-inspired regions of the Pokemon world. So perhaps our player is from Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, or Kitakami here on holiday. And for secret number 2, well, yeah, just try to come back to this platform at any point in the game. You'll be told that there is a train waiting to depart for the airport, suggesting that that is where you will go. You will fly away. You are definitely not from this region. But should you actually push the matter and try 3 times to get onto the platform, you'll succeed. You'll hear the train depart. You will fall asleep on it, only to wake up again back in Lumiose City. How did this happen? At the very beginning of the game, on the giant screen just outside the city, you're welcomed to Lumiose and taught about how people here live with Pokemon. And this is a very clever way to integrate the classic welcome to the world of Pokemon spiel that you get from the professors as you start every other Pokemon game. As you explore the city, you'll meet your rival, as well as later down the line, Canari. And if they seem familiar to you, they should, because actually, there are Easter eggs even earlier than leaving the train station when you're traveling into Lumiose. You swipe past both your rival, which suggests you were watching an ad for Team MZ, which is great, so you actually knew them before you even arrived, and Canari. This is really, really funny, because it means that when Naveen is talking to you about, do you know who Canari is? You absolutely do. You may already be a giant fan. Earlier on, you'll have an encounter with a Pokefan trainer class. There's references all over this guy, from the Pokeballs he's wearing to the Ultra Ball image on his hair. Very confusing. But the main thing to know is the t-shirt, which depicts a surfing Pikachu. Of course, a reference to the classic Pokemon card, Surfing Pikachu. This is such a popular thing for Pikachu that not only can Pikachu learn surf and surfboarding in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but also there's a Surfing Pikachu minigame in Pokemon Yellow. If you don't know which starter to pick, don't worry, because you can always pick the Pancham. It's funny when you do it, but obviously you're not locked into a Pancham. The game really wants you to have one of the main 3 starters, but I kind of wish a little bit that it let you actually select this Pokemon for in case you wanted to play through on a sort of hard mode. Being welcomed into Hotel Z, you get given the keys to room 202. I was taking a good look at the number 202 in the world of Pokemon, but I actually think it's a reference to the number in the real world. There's a whole school of thought about numbers having special meanings. 202 is a perfect one for this game, though. It is an angel number that signifies being on the right path, encouraging balance, trust, and intuition, and a need to listen to your inner guidance. The idea of balance obviously ties in deeply with Zygarde, who is the Pokemon that balances the ecosystem, and the idea of it being an angel number, well, that ties into AZ's story a little bit later on down the line with the name of the tower. Inside your room, you get a nice new old bit of tech, a new Rotom form in the Rotom clock. I guess, what's the opposite of virtual? Digital? Real world version. I doubt there's a Rotom in there, but it's a nice aesthetic to see. All across Lumiose City, there are so many posters that it's not even worth mentioning like all of them, so I'll just say them all as kind of a group, but my favorite one has to be the one showcasing Valerie. Valerie is the gym leader of Lumiose City, and she's also a model, and so it makes sense that she'd be modeling and appearing on a poster as a model. You can also find a similar item in the Pokemon Center, but before that even there's a little statue of the Lumiose Tower, but it's not the Lumiose Tower as it appears in this game. You can see very clearly it has the Pokemon Gym symbol on it, which is different to how it appears now because it is no longer a gym. Inside the Pokemon Center, there's also some magazines. It's kind of hard to tell what all of them are. One of them might be Paldea, and another might be Mount Coronet, which would make sense tying back to the most recent game and, of course, the Legends game. But the top one is very clear. This is the Galar region. This is by Hilbury, where the hieroglyph of a Gigantamax toxicity on the darkest day. Go-Go as a taxi service used to be a key part of the industry of Lumiose City, but not anymore, not with all these redevelopment plans and the separation of people and Pokemon into wild zones and, well, everywhere else. We learned that the Skiddo and Go-Goats have become a lot more skittish since so many more Pokemon and people have come to the city. Deep inside Hotel Z, we see many of the various things adorning the place are designed to be in theme with Floette, my favorite being the lampshades. The bottom of the lampshades are all Floette's tail. Just outside the Pokemon lab, we meet the Power of Science is Amazing guy. This guy shows up all through Pokemon's history, mostly outside Pokemon labs. When doing the Team MZ meetings, we are given croissant curry. This, of course, being a cultural fusion of the two signature dishes of the Galar region and Kalos region. Croissants and the curries, as they can be seen in the curry decks. Emma is back, and for a lot of people they won't remember who Emma is. I must do a lore breakdown video on Emma and Luca at some point soon, but Emma is absolutely fascinating. Appearing in the post-game of Pokemon X and Y, she was taken in by Luca after being taken control by the Team Flare member Zorosic. He did this by way of the Essentia suit that she's wearing throughout the game. But there's something else she's wearing through the game which is another reference, and this is the eye pin that is in her hair. It's subtle, it's an eye shape, and of course this would only be a reference to Looker. You look with your eyes. This Easter egg actually isn't from Pokemon Legends ZA, it's from one of the promotional trailers for the Mega Evolutions, this being Mega Victory Bell. Inside the trailer for Mega Victory Bell, for just a short moment, we see a creepy hex maniac ghost girl through a window. And this is a common trope in Pokemon, but really it dates back to Pokemon X and Y, the Hex Maniac, who says, "No, you're not the one," and then creepily disappears. Now this cool reference is all about my good friend Malamar. Malamar had a whole bit of promotional material where it seemed to take over the mind of everyone in Lumiose City using its hypnotic powers. Good for you, Malamar. Good for you. Here's the thing though, we've always known Malamar is powerful, but not that powerful. Access to Mega Evolution seems to have enhanced it, and much like with Dragonair, there is a Pokédex entry for Malamar that's relatively new. It came about in one of the Pokemon Sword and Shield DLCs that says that Malamar and its hypnotic powers may have been responsible for altering some historical events, suggesting that Malamar's Mega Evolution has appeared somewhere else in history. I find the character of Vinnie fascinating. Look at his incredible design, and many people noticed quite early on that the design is very clearly a reference to Mega Rayquaza. Obviously, Quasartico and Rayquaza means that the names are connected, and it is designed to evoke that same kind of mental imagery. But just look at this. The color of the green shirt and shoes, the way that his sideburns and slash beard kind of jagged out like that. This is very clearly an attempt to mimic the Delta Pokemon. It especially makes sense given the important role of Rayquaza within the history of Mega Evolution. Mega Drampa is a perfect choice for Vinnie, as it has Pokédex entries mentioning that if a child it has made friends with is bullied, Drampa will find the bully's house and burn it to the ground. Vinnie also uses a Baneri on his team, and you defeat the Baneri right before he sends out Drampa, so it symbolically works so well. We also got introduced to the character of Lida. Lida is likely related to Turnio. I don't think there's any doubt for a lot of people. They both have a similar hairstyle, both love to dance, and their names mean opposites. Lida meaning hard and tough, while Turnio means light and airy. One of our companions through the game is Naveen, and Naveen, in my opinion, is a reference and possibly related to Cyrano of the Blueberry Academy. He's the Academy's director, and one of the cool little Easter eggs on him is that he wore a scarf featuring the pattern of Honedge's blade, a Pokemon from Kalos, and a Pokemon whose evolution Aegislash appears on the tie of Naveen. With Cyrano being a school director and then Naveen wearing a school tie, I can't help but wonder if this is his grandson or this person is related in some way. We get reintroduced to the character of Mabel, although for many of you I'd imagine it's a first introduction because who remembered Mabel? Not me. Not me. She is, of course, the assistant professor of Professor Sycamore's lab, and you notice that she still has the Team Flare logo. Except here, the logo is blue instead of red, a simple reference to the power of fire increasing and the heat increasing, and as that does so, it becomes blue. Mabel herself actually being an old Team Flare admin with blue hair seems to be a pretty close reference to Silene of the Galaxy Expedition team. When Legends Arceus was first announced, we thought she might be a villain because of her relationship to, well, Cyrus. She's also the one that gives you the Pokédex research, so I think this works really, really well. In Pokemon Legends ZA, we meet Corbeau and the Rust Syndicate, and there is so much to talk about here, so many little details and references. First of all, outside of their base, we see a Weezing statue attached to the exterior. This is a reference to Pokemon Legends Arceus, in which we see a Galarian Weezing statue outside the base of the headquarters of the Galaxy Expedition team, who were, at least at the beginning, speculated to be the villains of the game, given their connection to Team Galactic. On top of that, there are many people that believe that Corbeau is related to Kieran and Carmine of Kitakami, and this would also make sense. One of Corbeau's more iconic Pokemon is Zarbok, and both Kieran and Carmine's grandparents use Zarbok and Weezing. Petron, of course, is the big poison mythical from the last generation that Kieran helps you defeat in the Mochi Mayhem DLC after it takes over the minds of the people of Kitakami, and of course the poison chain is a big part of its mythos. You also have a lot of people noting that Corbeau's outfit, it looks a little bit like Pheasantipity. But on top of all of that, there is a direct reference to Kitakami, or at least the Japanese-inspired Pokemon regions. You see, the Pokemon world has its own set of languages. People have been trying to decipher and decode them for years. There's all sorts of websites that show this, and it's super, super interesting. But you'll notice that a lot of the European-inspired areas of the Pokemon world, Lumiose City, the Paldea region, Galar, they all share a language, a same set of symbols. However, when it comes to the Japanese areas, they share a totally different set of symbols. Those same symbols can be seen across the Rust Syndicate's headquarters, connecting it directly to Kitakami, the only area in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet that shares those same characters. It could also be, of course, connected to Hisui, though Kitakami is also connected to Hisui. The point is, the inspirations and origins for the Rust Syndicate clearly trace back to that part of the Pokemon world. A little later into the story, we finally go to the Looker Bureau, and inside the Looker Bureau, we see a picture of Looker on the wall. But interestingly, Looker doesn't seem to appear in the game to be found anywhere. A picture right beside that has Xerosic. I have a little theory about Xerosic. We will learn later in the game that the character of Philippe used to be the boss of the Rust Syndicate. He's now Corbeau's main henchman, and he has a build not too dissimilar to Xerosic, and given that he respects Lysander and Team Flare helped with the, origin of a lot of the Rust Syndicate's members, it does seem to make sense that perhaps, leaving his life of crime behind, Xerosic takes up a new identity as Philippe. Also in the Looker Bureau, there's this picture of what seems to be a Lapras on the wall behind Emma. When you zoom in really, really far, it kind of reminds me of the old Nessie photo, the Loch Ness Monster. It's a pretty famous photo. It was a hoax, of course, but exactly the kind of thing a detective would have in their office if they're following some leads on a mysterious sighting. Lapras is not that mysterious, though. All across Lumiose City, the districts have different manhole covers. This is a pretty common thing in Japan. There's a bunch of Pokelids that are findable across different prefectures of Japan. And even in the Kitakami DLC, we saw a manhole cover of Milotic, which is very tied to the lore of the Kitakami area. But here we see that Go-Go is the Vert Plaza icon, the Blue Plaza is Greninja, Pyroar for the Rouge Plaza, Magenta is Aegislash, and Holucha for June, with the Central Plaza just having some Pokeball-looking lids. There are restaurants all across Lumiose City, and I have to say it's very strange that they're eating sushi given the existence of, well, Tatsugiri. That said, it's possible that the sushi actually comes from Veluza, as Veluza in Scarlet and Violet's Pokédex entries talks about how it sheds off fillets of its own body, so perhaps that is what they're eating? Otherwise, they may just simply be confirming that regular fish also exist, which is odd because Pokemon's gone a long way out of their way in recent years to not mention real-life animals. In one of the side quests, you have to take the strongest Pikachu you have to battle a kid who is just obsessed with using only Pikachu. And if you look at his outfit, it seems pretty clear that this is a nod to the one and only Ash Ketchum. An NPC Furisode girl mentions the kimono girls of Johto, and this makes sense because Furisode is just really another word for kimono. Additionally, when we first got the furrows girls, they were in Valerie's gym, and Valerie is from the Johto region. She uses an evolution much like the kimono girls, so it's suspected there's a connection between the furrows girls of Kalos and the kimono girls of Johto. Across the city of Lumiose, there are pink mega shards that are causing the rogue Pokemon phenomenon. This is a lot like in the anime. It seems to be a direct reference to Requirium that appears and causes Pokemon to become pretty agitated and in some cases, mega evolve. We've learned that the winner of the Pokemon Legends ZA Royale will be granted a wish, and wish granting is intrinsically tied to mega evolution. Megastones appear as meteorites, often falling from the sky like falling stars, or rather wishing stars. This became really clear in the Hoenn region, which is constantly hit by meteorite strikes, and it ties deep into the lore of Hoenn. I'll do a whole video breaking down the lore of the Hoenn region and the Weather Trio, and in particular, of course, Jirachi, a wish-granting Pokemon. However, it is actually Mega Rayquaza that people would wish to. The Draconids would do so at the top of the Sky Pillar to protect the people of Hoenn by hoping that Rayquaza would Mega Evolve. So Mega Evolution and wishes, it's all tied very deeply together. I actually have done a whole video specifically on that topic. Warp panel technology is quite a rare technology in the world of Pokemon, only really appearing in the Selfco headquarters, and then also across many evil team bases in the Pokemon world, particularly the Lysander Lab in Lumiose City. It does appear in Area 0, but it's clear that this technology is quite hard to get hold of, and yet, as part of the Lumiose redevelopment plan, it now appears all across the city. One of the first things you'll see in Lumiose City is the giant Rotom satellite dish. Rotom technologies have been appearing all across the Pokemon world, but largely they started not in Generation 4, where the Pokemon had various forms, but actually in Pokemon Sun and Moon, where we had the Rotom Dex for the first time. This ultimately became the Rotom phone, and now we even have the Rotom comms pad, I guess? It's likely that the Rotom phone actually did come from the Rotom Dex. Both devices share a lot of features. But the Rotom Dex, as we learned in Pokemon Sun and Moon, was actually developed by none other than Clemont, the gym leader of Lumiose City. In fact, the Rotom form-changing items, as well as the Poke Radar, which is definitely another one of those Pokedex-esque features, was initially found in Professor Sycamore's lab. So it makes sense that they have their headquarters here. There was also another reference to this very recently with Nemona. Nemona mentions that her parents are both on the board for the Rotom phone company. And speaking of Nemona, perhaps another reference, I'm not super convinced, but a lot of people have pointed it out, and so I feel obliged to include it. In Nemona's house in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we see this artwork of Greninja. I think it just looks like an ordinary Greninja using a Shoryuken, but many say that this is a clear intentional nod to Mega Greninja, which of course we now have. I mentioned a moment ago Professor Sycamore's lab, and in Professor Sycamore's lab, even today, there is an image of Professor Sycamore and a Garchomp, which is very sweet, but not something that happened in Pokemon X and Y. He never had a Garchomp. It did, however, happen in the Pokemon XYZ anime arc, suggesting that there is some kind of either a reference, or perhaps even that arc is somehow canon to the world of Pokemon Legends ZA. Speaking of references to the anime, the whole battle system is a reference to the animated series, with battles happening more fluidly outside of the convention that we've had literally since the beginning of Pokemon. I've always dreamed of battles being like this. We also get the follow-up from since Generation 4, I think it is, where Pokemon are actually poisoned outside of battle now, making the Pokemon world and battle system feel much more like it was first depicted on TV. One of the more interesting NPCs in Lumiose City streets is a member of the Pokedex Research Society, who would like to come up with their own Pokedex entries. This is really interesting, suggesting that Mabel's got all sorts of people out there looking for Pokemon, and as long as the, I suppose, evidence of what they catch aligns with it, people can even submit their own Pokedex entries. During the main events of the story, if you return to the Lumiose lab, you are offered a choice of a Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. A classic throwback reference, of course, to Generation 1, but also to Pokemon X and Y, where you got your starters way earlier than visiting the lab, and so when you get to the lab, you have the choice: Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle. When taking part in the ZA Royale, the W rank boss reflects the Unova gym leaders, Silent, Chili, and Cress. This is that he is a chef who uses the 3 elemental monkeys. There's also a guaranteed shiny in this game, a shiny Mareep that's part of a side quest. It's fun, a little hidden thing out of the way, but it's definitely a reference to Pokemon Legends Arceus, where the same thing was possible with a shiny Ponyta. There is another guaranteed shiny in the game, but it is shiny that you cannot have. If you complete the Elite Four Furrow quest, well, the leader, the champion of that Elite Furrow, they have a shiny Furrow. And this is one of the few NPCs in the whole of the Pokemon world that even has a shiny. There are a couple that can appear in battle facilities, but the main one that's kind of outside of those zones, which are sometimes considered non-canon, is a character in the Seafolk village of Alola, and they have a shiny Execute. Now, if you're this far into a video about secrets, references, and Easter eggs, then I have something for you. I mean, this whole channel's for you, Lorekeeper Toby. Since I've come back, I've been sharing my passions with the world, and I want to do something a little bit more than just like a generic Easter eggs video. I want to go that extra mile and do 151. So I'm announcing it here first, the launch of StorekeeperToby.com, my brand new project with a new City of Light A1 glow-in-the-dark poster. Yeah, you heard right. The City of Light is a fantastic poster designed by my lovely fiancée, Cup of Fee. You can actually spot us in the City of Light, as well as a number of other hidden details and mysteries. And if you turn out the light, there are 100 cells hidden across the city that are, yes, glow in the dark. It's not just a poster, there's also incredible new caps that we are arguing over, red versus blue, the coin of shadows and purity, and a special GS notebook you might have seen in my videos recently. There's even some hidden secrets in the item descriptions themselves. This was made for you, a lover of hidden secrets and hidden details. There's also a limited time product, so head on over to StorekeeperToby.com today, linked in the description, to support the channel and support your own love of this kind of thing. And now, let's get back to our 151. Nearly 2 years before the release of Pokemon Legends ZA, we already had references. In its initial teaser trailer, we learnt about the Lumiose City redevelopment plan, headed up by what we know now as Quasartico Inc. But the redevelopment plan of Lumiose is actually a nod to the redevelopment plan of Marvel City in the Hoenn region. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we see a very different Marvel City to that we saw in the original games. Watson confirms that it's undergone a redevelopment plan headed up by Greater Marvel Holdings. They're also responsible for the Sea and New Marvel projects. But on top of that, both cities are the homes of the electric gyms of the region. Both have name descriptions related to light, with, of course, Lumiose City being the City of Light and Marvel City being the bright and shiny City of Fun. In Marvel City, there are many references to Lumiose, especially, of course, the Lumiose Prism Tower that's at the very heart of the central courtyard. And on top of all of that, Greater Marvel Holdings developed all of these projects using life energy of Pokemon. They, of course, coined this technology Infinity Energy, the same energy accessed through Mega Evolution. So you can see how these things connect to modern-day Lumiose. Throughout Lumiose City, we see statues across the various wild zones. These, of course, are the gym statues, as seen all throughout the franchise's history. Originally in Pokemon Red and Blue, these statues were just the generic monster statue. They mostly looked like Rhydon, and in fact that statue pattern looking like a Rhydon did continue all the way into Generation 4, with actual Rhydon statues appearing in the Sinjo Ruins event and the Ruins of Alph. However, the statues did begin to diverge, with Pokemon Origins depicting them as a strange cat-like creature, and then truly in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is where we see a design that resembles that we now see all across the modern Pokemon franchise, and of course here in the heart of the city. In the first full trailer that we got for Pokemon Legends ZA, we actually had confirmation of something that I suppose isn't an Easter egg or a reference, it's just really interesting. Every single Pokemon has been catchable across the entire generation of Switch games, apart from the Patrat line, the Elemental Monkeys, and Furfrou. But now with this very first trailer, we actually ended up seeing that they would finally all be catchable, completing the Pokedex. Furfrous are really interesting as one as well, because in order to get all the different Furfrou trims in Pokemon, in your Pokemon home, you had to get them from Pokemon Go, and certain trims were exclusive to different areas of the world. So finally, Pokemon Legends ZA is a game that allows us to complete the Pokedex. Just through the Nintendo Switch, that is. This is actually a reference about something that is not in the game, that's actually quite absent. Most of the Mega Evolutions of the past appear here in Legends EA, but critically we're missing Mega Latias, Latios, Rayquaza, and the Hoenn starters. Of course, they're all Hoenn-centric Pokemon, and Hooper is the star of the Mega Dimension DLC. This connects very directly to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, where of course Hooper opened portals all across the Hoenn region, summoning forth legendaries from other places and times. So I suspect that Hooper is going to connect us back to Hoenn. All Pokemon have a certain cry, and when you interact with Floette in the Floette side quest, they all say the same thing. But not AZ's Floette. It's like it's speaking in a totally different, more ancient dialect. Now for the bit that you've probably heard me speak about on this channel a little bit, so I'll run through it quite quickly. We have the Lumiose Museum filled with relics and artifacts. I've done a whole video tour of this museum with another friend of mine, Amaze Dragon, and on top of that, I've even deciphered the hieroglyphs upstairs. Those are other videos that you can find linked in the description. While you're down there, make sure to subscribe. But let's do this. Downstairs, there are a number of paintings that appeared in the original Lumiose Museum 5 years earlier in Pokemon X and Y. And for such a rare and mythical Pokemon, I think it's very interesting that at least 2 of them feature Mew. But new paintings appear also, like this one that previously was not in the Lumiose Museum but was instead inside the Parfum Palace, a golden ornate castle built 300 years ago to celebrate and show off the richness and power of the king who ruled at the time. This was thought for a long time to be AZ, as in Pokemon X and Y in the post-game, when you interact with this picture, it says that, hey, it looks a little bit like AZ, but it's not. Here we learn for the very first time that current information and new evidence suggests that this is a king who is the descendant of that king's brother, indicating that this family lineage, the line that ultimately results in Lysander in Pokemon X and Y, has always maintained a level of wealth and privilege over the people of Kalos. There's also a whole section on the Tower of Mastery, and specifically Lucario. Both the Lucario statue replica and the kid looking at it confirm that Lucario is not the first Mega Evolution. It's just the first one discovered in the Kalos region. This was a point of lore contention for a while. There's also a very fun painting of Diantha, which is a reference to the lady with the pearl earring, a famous bit of art. But what's fun, of course, is that Diantha is a Pokemon made of diamonds, so she is the lady with a diamond earring. Oh, Diamond and Pearl remakes confirmed? What is this, 2015? There is this painting that was in Pokemon X and Y of Lumiose City. This is Valerie's gym. But what's interesting to note is while in X and Y, this painting existed, but you couldn't see it because it was so small and pixely, here you can see it in all its beautiful details. And there is a detail that is wrong. This clock is a 13-hour clock when you actually visit Lumiose City. 13 hours represents the hour of the fairy. There's another error in one of the paintings as well, the one that shows the outside, the backgrounds of Parfum Palace. Not only is the Golurk statue very different to the one that actually appears in-game, but also there are these statues of Uxie on top of pillars, but in the game, these are Dratini. Upstairs, there's the Hisuian exhibit with the aforementioned glyphs. These glyphs can be found all across the land of Hisui, and they have a meaning. It's confirmed here. I think this invites us to go back to Legends Arceus, look at the glyphs, and see if we can decipher them. I already have here on the channel. That video is, linked down below. But this new glyph may itself have a meaning, and not just be showing off one of each of the different symbols. It can be read a number of different ways, and the comment section of that glyph deciphering video, wow, you have all blown my mind with all your different interpretations. So many of them, I think, line up with the events of this game or Legends Arceus. We see a number of hairstyles on the wall of the museum. These hairstyles appear in the background of when you're getting your hair cut in Pokemon Legends Arceus. During the full museum tour video, by the way, so many of you got in the comments and rightfully mocked me about this. There is a reference to a game called Go. I, of course, with my Pokemon brain on, went, oh, it's a reference to Pokemon Go. But I guess this one's kind of an anti-reference. It's not. It's just talking about a game called Go that is real and exists, but my hyperfocus made me think, oh, I guess it's referencing Pokemon? All the people of Jubilife Village playing Pokemon Go on the Arc phone? Like, they're just all gathered around the one Arc phone that they have? By interacting with the picture of the training grounds, we learned that Ingo made it back to the modern day. Ingo was a time traveler from modern-day Unova and had a twin brother called Emmett. However, in Pokemon Legends Arceus, he shows up with lacking memory. Except, according to this picture, one day he just left, saying, it's time for me to return. So there's a strong implication that he's back with his brother now. We actually learn that the multi-trains are back up and running, confirming that Ingo has made it back. There is also, speaking of returning characters, the clothing of one Volo, or at least the ancient Sinnoh people. But it isn't just clothing. An NPC standing outside the exhibit mentions that the person who bought these clothes in to donate them to be on display bought them in himself. Not only that, he looked at the artwork of Professor Laventon that can also be found in the exhibit with a sort of loving and nostalgic air, suggesting this is the man himself.
Volo has returned.
There are other fascinating bits of clothing here, though. Of course, we see the kimono and the armor of Commander Kamado. This armor he mentions in the game is Galarian armor, but he himself is not Galarian, referencing that he is from the Johto region in a number of different ways, including his Kansai Ben dialect. But what is fascinating, just as I mentioned in my 125 Easter eggs about Legends Arceus, you should totally check that one out after this, is that armor is a reference to Wickstrom's armor of the Elite Four of the XY games. Wickstrom has been reached out to for comment, and believes that perhaps Wickstrom's ancestor gave a couple suits of armors out to people, except implying conflict between the two regions around the time of Legends Arceus, somewhere between 300 and 150 years ago. We know there were tensions between the two regions. Perhaps this is also around the time Parfum Palace was built, so it's hard to know what's for certain, just that these things are connected. There is also the Galaxy Expedition Team flag, and interacting with this tells us that the expedition team was made up of a mix of different cultures, including Galarian. We obviously know that Professor Laventon is from the Galar region. We say that he acts like a classic Galarian, and the thought is that he's the ancestor to Leon and Hop. But at the same time, given Kamado's Galarian armor, it's painting a weird picture about where is Kamado actually from too. Even vaguer bits of history appear on the wall though, as we see the pictures of, well, we're not actually sure who. Two of the characters on the left and right seem to resemble Archie and Maxi, at least from their original appearances in the original Ruby and Sapphire. The middle character, perhaps older, of Unova. They are said to represent the sun, sea, and land. The man representing the sun can be seen all over the Hisui region in the tents of both the Diamond and Pearl clan, with only a particular patron saint, I suppose, or founding member's portrait appearing in the tents of the respective Diamond and Pearl clans, suggesting that the middle guy is very important. Land and sea would also make sense for people representing Archie and Maxi, their Groudon and Kyogre, but sun is a little bit of a weird one. What's it doing there? Is sun talking about the Volcarona that belongs to Older? How does Volcarona fit in with Groudon and Kyogre? Or is it all merely symbolic? This is going to be a great tool for theory crafting down the line, I have no doubt. We learn that parts of Laventon's original Pokedex were found in an abandoned shed. I do wonder if this is the shed just outside of Jubilife Village, the one where Laventon first meets you and is first researching some Pokemon. We don't know whose this shed belongs to, but I'll be looking at a number of sheds in the Sinnoh region and houses, seeing if it could pop up there. Later on in the game, a giant portrait of Laventon appears in a story-only section in which you are summoned to deal with some rogue Gengar. Why is the portrait there? What does it mean? Is one of these Gengar Laventon? We're nearly done with the museum. There are a number of bits of artwork that again also appeared in Pokemon X and Y. These represent a number of power stations, all of them renewable energies. The space station did not appear in the artworks 5 years ago. Perhaps that means the space station's new, or perhaps they just didn't have room for the artwork. Also, there are a number of missing Pokeball types in the museum. We see the Pokeball factory, so the implication here is that all of these Pokeball types are types that the Pokeball factory creates. However, we are missing the Dream Ball, Beast Ball, Strange Ball, GS Ball, and Cherish Ball. None of these appear. And this makes a ton of sense. The Beast Ball was created by the Aether Foundation. The Dream Ball is from the world of dreams. That was a little bit more confusing. Cherish Ball, you only get events. GS Ball seems to be one of a kind. And the Strange Ball is, well, strange. I mentioned that a number of the bits of artwork seem to get moments of the Pokemon world wrong. And this is possibly because they're interpretive. We can see reading the labels of a number of these portraits and pictures. They are based on artists' interpretation who traveled from abroad. There is an artist who traveled from abroad, that being Ilma, and possibly his friend Mina. They are both artists. Ilma has the Pokemon Smeargle, and they seem to have some connection. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, the Shallow Sable, the delicacy of the Kalos region, can be given to you by Ilma's family. So there is maybe a story here that's well worth looking into. The Spwapper, by the way, that you get given from the Lumiose Museum, do not release or trade it away, because it evolves into a very different form of Vivian, the oceanic form, so I wonder where it is from. The very existence of Pokemon Legends EA is in itself a reference and a nod to the lost and forgotten Pokemon Z version we never got. Pokemon games used to come in these trilogies. Pokemon Red and Blue came with Yellow, Gold and Silver with Crystal. This continued until Platinum. With Black and White, there was a thought that there would be a Pokemon Gray, but instead we got sequel games. But with X and Y, for the first time, we got absolutely nothing. Even with Sun and Moon, we got Ultra Sun and Moon versions, and then beyond that point, we were on to DLC. Pokemon Z is completely lost to time, and so this game acts to fill in that very gap. Not only that, but the name itself is also a reference. Z to A. Well, ZA. The end moving round to the beginning. Now, of course, you might think I'm referring to AZ, whose name itself is the beginning to the end of the alphabet, but that's not it. It's actually a reference to the other game that ties into the Mega Evolution lore pretty heavily, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, with Alpha being the beginning and Omega being the end of the Greek alphabet. So it seems that the naming conventions of all these games and characters and moments are suggesting that there is a cycle to the world of Pokemon, and that what ends is a beginning, and what is the beginning means ultimately there will be eventually another end. This also ties in really nicely with both legendaries, Zygarde and Rayquaza, both giant green serpents, both of course with their ties to Mega Evolution lore, and both at least partly inspired by the mythologies of the world serpent, a serpent, an Ouroboros, that eats its own tail, constantly going, the beginning is the end is the beginning. But on top of that, Zygarde also takes inspiration from the Norse god Jormungandr. Jormungandr, as well as many of the other Norse deities that inspired the legendaries and areas of Pokemon X and Y's mythos, tie very deeply into the event of Ragnarok, a time in Norse mythology when all of the gods clash, the world ends, and with its end, the world begins anew again. So it all ties into the themings perfectly. We got Mega Dragonite as a brand new Mega Evolution, and no, the reference here is not that Dragonite is inspired and a reference to Dragonair. That might be a little lame. What's more interesting is the angelic wings on the top of its head, the main point of criticism that connected Dragonair are very, well, angelic. In fact, a lot of Dragonite's lore refers to it as a sea guardian and kind of describes it as being an angel, someone you want watching over you. I've actually done a whole video on this. I highly recommend you check out after this video. It's super, super interesting. But what is truly interesting is there was a reference to this Mega Evolution, but it was actually in Scarlet and Violet. This in Dragonair's Pokédex entry, which for the first time in over 20 years said that it is in fact called the Divine Pokemon. That hadn't appeared anywhere else before, and now suddenly, right before the Mega Evolution reveal, we get this. Now let's have a look at Mega Raichu X and Mega Raichu Y. X looks a little bit more like Raichu in design, while Y takes more traits from Pikachu, but both of them are inspired very heavily, it seems, by Gorochu. If you've not heard of Gorochu, it's a scrapped third stage evolution for the Pikachu line. Pikachu was supposed to evolve into Raichu and then into Gorochu in the days of Generation 1, but the idea got scrapped, and the description and image of this fake mon, or of this scrap mon, has become quite famous over the years. One particular image, and I will try and find the artist to credit here, has become absolutely synonymous with this design of Gorochu. Based on the description that we had, and based on that description, you can certainly see how Mega Raichu X and Y would be inspired, and a reference to it. This next one isn't so much a reference, just as it is something that's very cool, a nice bit of attention to detail. Canari is, of course, our streamer, and as streaming and YouTube culture seems to be entering the world of Pokemon, I gotta say, I really like her setup. I mean, she's got an audio mixer like me. She's got what looks to be a classic Shure SM7B, which is what I'm talking into right now. And she's even got all these adoring fans who definitely subscribe to her, just like I do. Thanks, everyone. A couple of clothing references that I found. The F00 shirt and Full Metal Cop shirt can be found inside of the, I guess, film clothing store. These are references to the Unova region's Pokestar Studios. There's also one where on the back you can see a sort of Godzilla shirt. It's a Godzilla reference. You've got a Gigantamax Charizard fighting off against a Gigantamax Pangoro. This is a reference, of course, to the Galar region, but also a reference to Godzilla, and also a reference to a bit of promotional art for Pokemon Sword and Shield. During the story, you'll need to buy an ultra fancy schmancy outfit to get into Hotel Rishomise, and if you look very closely, you can see the very clear image of, that's the Terra symbol. Inside the Rust Syndicate hideout, there's all sorts of ornate statues. I wouldn't really call them references just because they're just things. They're just things in the Pokemon world. But what's really interesting is when you interact with a Hisuian Sneasel that's on the desk, it's holding a Kaban coin. This is the same coin as Meowth's. It's actually interesting that they didn't use a Meowth holding one of its own coins here, given that it is a reference to the classic lucky cat holding a coin. Of all Gen 1 references, Silphco make an appearance. You can see their logo on various boxes throughout the city. Silphco, of course, being the organization you save from Team Rocket, who are trying to obtain the Master Ball. There is a gem in the window of the Stone Emporium that looks an awful lot like one that can be seen in the Unova games. There are pink gems that can be found all across the city, and they contain mega shards. I can't help but wonder if they're connected, of course, to Diantha, the only Kalos Pokemon at the time of X and Y, at least, that can mega evolve, but also if they aren't made up of the same stuff, this mega energy or mega power that is crystallized that we see in the Anastar City Sundial. The Sundial doesn't actually get a lot of references throughout this game, which is surprising given its connection to Mega Evolution. Perhaps we'll learn more about it in the DLC also. Okay, fellow lorekeeper, you're now this far into a video of the secrets and Easter eggs of the Pokemon world. Yeah, this is definitely the place for you. So I know for a fact you are going to love the fact that across the City of Lights, you can find hyperspace portals. Yeah, I'm talking about my poster again. I really think you're going to like it. Links in the description. Let's keep going. And now, I've mentioned a few of them already, but let's jump into the NPCs of Lumiose City, because so many of them have so much to say. This is what we like to see in a Pokemon game. Firstly and chiefly, there appears to be some kind of hex maniac in the ZA Royale who wants to know what "you're not the one" really meant. I want to know too. I'll be hunting around the DLC if I can't find anything in game. There are a few people at the base of the Prism Tower that imagine a large bird Pokemon roosting at the top. I think this is a very direct reference to Ho-Oh and Lugia roosting at the top of the towers of the Johto region. We also learned that Pokemon Badges and the Pokemon League is still very much going. They're wondering if the ZA Royale is going to catch on or if the League will keep going. But of course, it won't be happening with the Lumiose Tower as a gym anymore. The character who gives you the TM for Electroweb references Iono directly. He's saying her catchphrase, which means Iono is already a streamer at the time of ZA. But this actually makes sense because in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, another NPC comments that Iono has been streaming for years. It's gonna help with timeline discussions, but there's also somebody who mentions Drayton, the grandson of Drayden, and how they want to see a battle between them and Drayden's adopted granddaughter, Iris. Both of them are dragon experts, and Drayton, of course, is a student at the Blueberry Academy. He's been held back 3 years, so he's a little older than he looks at the time of the Indigo Disc, but still, this is going to help us very much with the timeline. There is a Galar mention, which is actually very important. It mentions that Leon came to the Galar region and couldn't find his way around, but also that he is the former champion of the Galar region, suggesting these games take place after Pokemon Sword and Shield. This is going to be very relevant to a Pokemon timeline video I'll be doing very, very soon, if it's not out already. There is a bug trainer who likes to mega evolve her Pinsir, and she mentions that there's a word on the street that there's this shady guy called AZ who went to the Hoenn region to learn the secrets of mega evolution and bring it back to Quasartico so that Quasartico could, I don't know, make mega evolution happen. It's all rumors, but AZ does have ties to the Hoenn region. The crater that created Sutopolis City and the Cave of Origin just outside, he planted a giant tree, and below that, the petals of leaves that match his AZ Floette's flower. So perhaps he really did go to the Hoenn region between X and Y and ZA. An NPC stood by the tower mentions both Bonnie and Clemont. And what's really interesting is that Bonnie is described as a quizmaster, which is the same description for Canari. Given that she's an electric type trainer, I wonder if she was in some way inspired by the Lumiose gym. Timelines allowing, I might even guess that she's the same person as Bonnie, but it wouldn't make sense. These games happen only 5 years after Pokemon X and Y. Dexio and Cena also get a mention as the research assistants of Professor Sycamore. And speaking of Professor Sycamore, he and Trevor get a mention. They're in another region conducting important research. And another NPC mentions that they're a student or an ex-student of Professor Rowan's. Professor Sycamore was an ex-student of Professor Rowan's. Rowan is the leading authority on evolution, while of course Sycamore believes himself to be the leading authority on mega evolution. So perhaps she once worked in the lab. We learn from another NPC that Tierno is busting up moves in the Unova region. We see a reference to the PR Studio, which is a place from X and Y where you can make videos with your Pokemon. Another player mentions Grace, the player character's mum from X and Y, who is a famous Rhyhorn racer. We don't get to Rhyhorn race in this game, which I think is very sad, because I would love to Rhyhorn ride the whole way across Lumiose. There's a man stood on a rooftop. He wants you to only use bird Pokemon or battle his bird Pokemon. He references Sky Battles, which were a new battle mechanic in X and Y that sadly have gone away, but he remembers them fondly. The International Police is mentioned by one of the ZA Royale goers. They say that they've got to pretend that they're bad at fighting with Pokemon because they're undercover. Well, their cover is blown, but it's so interesting that they would even get a mention, given that Looker doesn't seem to have appeared anywhere other than a reference himself. Piers of the Galar region is said to have written good songs by one of the baristas, so it again stands to reason that, yeah, the events of Sword and Shield happened before this game. There's also a mention of Seabold's culinary skills. He was one of the Elite Four members, and another mention to what happened to O-Powers. The O-Power guy appeared for the first time in X and Y, and then again in Oras, supporting the player with all sorts of strange powers that I guess are just not a feature in this game, so canonically we need to find a way to write them out. The Paldean character Geeta is also mentioned. I cannot pronounce her name. La Primaria? It's the name she goes by all through the world, and apparently she's very well known even here in Kalos. Another character mentions that they want to go to their next destination, which is going to Galar to do some Dynamaxing. And a billboard mentions that Diantha is still around, making movies. She was a movie star even in the time of X and Y. I wonder if she's a champion anymore. One of the NPCs mentioned that Absol can live for about 100 years, and they comment that this is a really long time for a Pokemon. This is actually a big, subtle lore drop, because while we know that some Pokemon live for a long time, we don't know what's considered long or short for a Pokemon's lifespan. So it's interesting to note that Pokemon may have lifespans similar to ours, and that 100 is considered pretty exceptional. Perhaps Pokemon generally don't live anywhere near as long as humans, and Absol living for 100 years is extremely exceptional. Either way, the fact that this person thinks that's exceptional is a little bit of information. There is another very curious mention. A Galarian who is said to be pesky for trying to avenge their ancestor. This is interesting, because when we look to the characters of Galar, not many of them we know about actually having ancestors from the time of ZA. It's thought that Laventon is perhaps the ancestor to Hop and Leon, but why would they be avenging him? I think there is a bigger theory here, but I would love to know your thoughts in the comment section. We also learned from some more NPC dialogue that Hoenn is, in fact, where Mega Evolution started, again setting in stone the Mega Evolution lore. There's an Ice-type trainer who seems to take her name from Glacier of the Elite Four of Hoenn and mentions her directly. Emma does what people have lovingly described as the Naruto run. This isn't really the Naruto run so much as it is just the Lucario run. But I get it. I see it. Outside the Quasartico building, we can find someone who has an Alolan Raichu, and it sort of tells us for the first time about regional variation. But also outside Quasartico, there are palm trees that, next to the Raichu, evoke a very certain image. The image of Alolan Executor, of course. There is a backpacker who mentions that they want to go to Alola to get a strange souvenir. This is a nod to the backpacker who was originally in Pokemon X and Y, who gave us the strange souvenir for the first time, itself a hint towards a future game, Pokemon Sun and Moon. A further NPC mentions visiting Paldea, just crossing the mountains to get there, which actually gives us some real-world geography. Of course, that is the case for Spain and France, but it's telling us that, yeah, the Pokemon world is shaped pretty similarly to ours. There is a Frostlass who beckons you up to the rooftop overlooking Wild Zone 12. Wild Zone 12 features various ice Pokemon, including Snorunt, and once you're there, the Frostlass disappears and leaves behind an Ice Stone. There's a comment that perhaps this was its unfinished business, but I wonder if this is sort of the life cycle of a Pokemon. After all, Mega Evolution Stones are said to be irradiated regular Evolution Stones, and what is it that they contain? What are they irradiated with? With the life essence and energy of a Pokemon. Perhaps Evolution Stones are a sort of container for the evolutionary energy of the Pokemon that passed away, all into a solidified bit of rock that, if introduced to another of its species, or perhaps a Curlier instead, will make it evolve in a different way. The very first Mega Evolution that you face as a rogue throughout the game is Absol, which is absolutely perfect, because Absol is known for signaling disaster. Often Absol gets blamed for this, but it's actually trying to be useful. But symbolically, it makes perfect sense as the first rogue Mega Evolution that you face. Now we've got some references just based on the designs of a couple of the new Pokemon. So again, be wary of spoilers here, but Shiny Mega Dragonite. We know that Mega Dragonite takes cues from Dragonair, but so too does Shiny Mega Dragonite, turning itself into the same color as Dragonair. This is a really strong choice as opposed to the pink of Shiny Dragonair. I think it looks incredible. There's also Mega Feraligatr. Its design is, I'll be honest, not my favorite. But when it closes its head, it looks like a Totodile. So that's what Feraligatr is doing. That's what this whole design is a reference to. There's also Shiny Slowpoke. It's had an update. It now looks closer to its Shiny from Generation 2, which thank goodness, because it is so hard to spot in the modern games. And then there's also, and this is my favorite, Mega Starmie. Look at them legs. Its Pokédex entry says that it's trying to be more human, but this really ties into the Deoxys theory. Deoxys is a humanoid alien, a psychic type with a gem-like core, just like Starmie. There's this idea of an invasion theory that Deoxys sent Starmie ahead. Starmie had Pokédex entries talking about how they communicate possibly with space. And the idea of these falling rocks, these falling stars, just like Deoxys, turning themselves more humanoid to take over, it's very fitting for the design and very terrifying. Pyroar is a mega evolution that not a lot of people are that impressed with the look. However, its shiny actually changes drastically from the original. It becomes this stark white. Now, of course, this might just be a clear reference to white hot flames, which is, yeah, sure, it could totally be. However, Pyroar has a special place as a sort of Lion King style Pokemon. In the Blueberry Academy, we see it on top of an area that's become lovingly known as Pride Rock. But in Japan, they actually have their own Lion King. It's called Kimba the White Lion, and Kimba the White Lion is, well, white, which I think is what this is actually a reference to. Throughout the history of Pokemon, Jigglypuff and Clefairy have had pretty similar journeys. They're often likened to one another. There's an original anime episode that shows them sort of as rivals. Both Pokemon became Fairy type after the Fairy type was introduced. Both got baby Pokemon when baby Pokemon were introduced, and both evolved via the Moonstone. So it was a little odd when Jigglypuff got Screamtail in the Paldean games and Clefairy got nothing. Until now, Mega Clefable fills the gap and completes the circle. There are also a few references in the later portion of the game about Z, or the point where X and Y meet. This is obviously, of course, a reference to Pokemon X and Y. It comes up enough that it's very intentional. Speaking of which, we're now moving into some later game and big plot stuff, so this is the big spoiler warning. Lady Jacinthe says that she has a 1000% sympathy for Zygarde, which is just very, very interesting because Zygarde is a Pokemon that works on percentages. 10% form, 50% form, and 100%. Perhaps 1000% is the new form we get in this game. For a game all about Zygarde, the Zygarde cores don't really appear, being collectibles in Pokemon Sun and Moon and representing Squishy from the Pokemon anime, but the core does appear for a blink and you'll miss it moment just before Jacinthe's tournament. I wanted to learn more about these little guys. You can also see after you've beaten Zygarde's 50% form in the tournament that the image of Zygarde is added to the tournament roster, which I think is really, really fun. Emma now uses Malamar on her team. Why this is important, of course, is that this is Xerosic's Malamar, most likely. A Pokemon that he used for evil that she now uses for good. Or does she? The fact that she has an image of him up on the wall and uses his Malamar actually gives us some really interesting insights, and I'm sure there'll be theories about this too. In the old Lysander Cafe, below which is Lysander Labs, there are many empty rooms and many Pokemon, but the main kind of boss at the end of it all is an Alpha Aegislash. Aegislash is said to be a Pokemon that belongs to kings, and given Lysander's lineage, it actually makes sense that this Pokemon, representing a fallen king, can be found down here below the ground. We also find one of the Route 10 stones. These are stones that emit a special energy that are just south of the ultimate weapon. There's also, and it doesn't appear to be used for anything in the game, an empty room that is Lysander's cell. It's a cell where he keeps AZ during the events of Pokemon X and Y. So if you're wondering what this room is about, that's what it is. It's a reference to that crucial plot point moment. You can also find all sorts of bits of artwork scattered across the walls of Lysander's lab, including original Pokemon sprite art from Generation 1. This lit up my face when I saw it. I love seeing stuff like this. We learned that the Prism Tower is 2,000 years old. This is integral to future Pokemon theories, because of course it looks very modern, but the version that we see in Pokemon X and Y is itself built over an older structure. The structure was designed to, I suppose, give eternal life. I'm still putting all the pieces together, but that 2,000 year date is very interesting. It lines up with the fall of the Draconids' home in Hoenn and the rise of the Paldean Empire 2,000 years ago, so I'm certain there's a story here. AZ claims to have incredible cooking skills, which makes sense given that he is probably the most traveled man in all of the Pokemon world. He's likely visited every single region. In the post-game, while pursuing Yveltal, we learned that Malva is the person that managed to capture Yveltal in the events of Pokemon X and Y. There's also a simulator called the Simulator 3000, where you can simulate the battles against rogue mega Pokemon. 3000, of course, being a reference to...
I love you 3000.
No, not that. Of course, 3,000 years ago, the time of the ultimate weapon. In battling Lysander in the post-game, you can see for his Mega Evolution, he pulls something out of his pocket. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it is his Mega Ring, the one that he clearly hasn't used in a long, long time from the days of Pokemon X and Y. At the very end of the game, there's this ladder of all the Rust Syndicate members, and I mean, I'm sure we all have the same idea. What happens if we jump off the roof and fall back down? They all have to get up again, making another ladder. They will do this 3 times, and on that 3rd time, they'll make all sorts of interesting comments, like actually kind of enjoying you climbing up them. That's interesting. In the final beats of the game, AZ's Floette seems to have lost control and vines sprout from the tower. Their vines warping all around the Lumiose tower is much like the events of the Pokemon anime, in which dark vines warp the tower and the Pokemon Zygarde gets a corrupted version. This is a very similar thing happening here. I suspect they looked to the anime for some inspiration. We learn the reason that you can only catch a 50% Zygarde at the end of Pokemon X and Y. It's because its cells were scattered all across the world. It took a lot of damage and needed to rebuild its strength slowly, and so its cells had to gather back together in the Terminus Cave. We also learn why it went to Alola. There it was able to learn a move much like the Z moves that appear in Alola that's directly referenced. The move is called Annihilate, and what's wonderful about this is not only is it a pun on Annihilate, but also light. It is quite literally inspired by the Z moves of Alola, which are all powered by Necrozma's light. Hoops and Hip Hop came up with a theory recently which I really, really love. So we're told in the game that Zygarde went to the Alola region to recharge its cells and to kind of learn the power of Z moves. However, there's been a long-standing question about Perfect Zygarde, that this is a form of Zygarde that has 5 colors in its cores. Red and blue, which match Xerneas and Yveltal, but then there's these other colors that match the box art of Sun and Moon, and then of course white in the middle would be Necrozma. However, Perfect Zygarde wasn't actually introduced until Sun and Moon, and the theory that Hoops mentions in his video, and I think this is so good, the idea is that Perfect Zygarde 100% actually doesn't exist without going to Alola. What we know as 100% Zygarde is really 100% Alolan Zygarde, which makes sense for the region that introduced regional variants, and that it can only become this way because it specifically ingested the powers of Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma. I wonder what would have happened if Zygarde's cells went to recharge in another region under the powers of other legendary Pokemon. Zygarde's Mega Stone transforms from a pebble the dog gives you. It's very, very sweet. But is it a pebble? Is it a meteorite? There's competing theories about how Mega Stones happen, whether they are meteorites from space, or whether perhaps they're irradiated stones, or irradiated stones from space. This could be some kind of evolution stone, this pebble, or it could be part of a meteorite. We just don't know yet. Another direct tie to Legends Arceus, we have Alpha Pokemon returning, and the NPC who introduces you to Alpha Pokemon notes that they were originally from Hisui. How did they get here into the city? This is answered a little bit in the postgame when you go to catch Xerneas and Yveltal. To catch Yveltal, you need to deal with a number of rogue Mega Evolution simulations, but for Xerneas, there's a real worry. The actual real rogue Mega Pokemon will start appearing in the city as a result of its overflowing life energy. But you don't battle rogue Megas, you battle alphas, so it seems like alpha Pokemon are a sort of early stage before a rogue Mega. One thing is for sure, they are agitated by the abundance of life energy, which sounds a lot like the alphas from Legends Arceus, who were agitated by the life energy coming through the space-time distortions, and those that got bolted with the biggest of it becoming the noble Pokemon. At the end of the game, you are left a Pokeball containing a Lucario. This Lucario is level 50, and it is said to have belonged to a dear friend of AZ's. This friend is Karina. You can see this in the original trainer ID. But here's some food for thought. Karina had 2 Lucarios. Is this Lucario the one that Karina used at the Pokemon Gym? Or the one that the player character of X and Y got to use? Perhaps it's found its way back to AZ. And now with you using it 5 years later, you actually share a Pokemon. We learn the many events that AZ has witnessed, including the Darkest Day and Galar. It makes sense, because it happened 3,000 years ago, which is when he was at war. However, 3,000 years is a broad span of time. What if it happened just before he was born? Well, we know for a fact it didn't. We now know that he at least saw the events and knew of it, and this will again become foundational to a number of theories, I'm sure, going forward. We also learned that the black flower, the rare flower of Floette, belonged to AZ's mother. He must have some of these seeds or some of these flowers somewhere, because we know a flower just like this one was planted outside the Sutopolis city cave of origin and the giant tree that's growing there. But clearly this is a rare form. It kind of confirms that this version of Floette is more like a regional variant, or perhaps the better way to think of it would be that modern day Floette is a regional variant with its many different colors and now able to evolve in the same way that a Galarian Meowth evolves into a Berserker. It's a different evolutionary branch. So perhaps AZ's Floette is kind of like a Hisuian form, but from ancient times, 3,000 years ago. Also, as I'm recording this video, I've kind of had a realization. These seeds that exist in modern day were maybe more common in ancient time, and even then they're described as rare in Pokemon Legends Arceus. I can't help but wonder, is the Seed of Mastery, that is the item you use in this game to max out your Pokemon stats, making them incredibly strong, like AZ's Floette, is this the seed that belongs to AZ's Floette? Lysander, now going by the name L, must live 3,000 years. It's really hard to know why. Like, why 3,000 years specifically? Is that just because it's how long AZ lived for? Is there something of a curse that hangs over his head that is specific to that amount of time? It's not known why he's so sure it will be 3,000 years, but it does seem to be the case that he's been given the same kind of long life, or immortality perhaps, that AZ had. AZ passes away in this game, referencing that the Z Hotel was designed to be his final residence, so he knew the end was coming. But it is interesting that the end came for him only a few years after the events of Pokemon X and Y, suggesting that something about the Eternal Flower returning to him somehow made him mortal again. So perhaps this is some kind of curse that's now been lifted. Lysander should have died, and now his life has been unnaturally extended, and as a result, one of his eyes is becoming a little bit, I suppose, whitened. Is he suffering from some kind of blindness? We're not really sure. This mimics AZ's look, of course, with his eye being covered, but also a brand new mega evolution, Chandelure, with only one of Chandelure's eyes being lit up, the other looking into the afterlife. Quite naturally as well, because there's also a side quest about Litwick. Litwick shines a bright light that absorbs the life energy of people and Pokemon. Doesn't that sound a little bit like Yveltal? I think Pokemon kind of address this very directly in ZA with a whole side quest about a child who, well, disappears with their Litwick, and their sibling is worried that they're going to have their life force drained. They've probably heard stories of Yveltal. I suppose that's what a Litwick really is at the end of the day, just an adorable, squishy little Yveltal that's going to take away your life.
Take away your life.
AZ's Floette has a very interesting Pokedex entry, the Eternal Flower. This rare Floette holds a plant that died out in ancient times. This Pokemon is said to harbor incredible power, suggesting that the flower means that this Floette really is like some kind of regional variant. But it's actually the Mega Evolution that has a Pokedex entry that I think is a real secret. It's really fascinating. The Eternal Flower has absorbed all the energy from Mega Evolution. The flower now attacks enemies on its own. This is just like Slowbro's Pokedex entry that I mentioned earlier, where it's the Shelder that Mega evolves, not the Slowbro. This suggests that the type of flower that the Floette is clung onto is itself a Pokemon. I do wonder if in a future game we'll work out what kind of Pokemon this is, and it perfectly explains it as a giant boss battle at the end of the game. This is truly fascinating and just opens up what we can find in the Pokemon world. Did you know there is a secret side quest that you only get after unlocking 20 of the Infinite Royales? So this is the true post-game. After completing all of that, you will get a message to go to Hotel Richimise, in which you will partake in a tournament where Jacinth battles you and all of the contestants are her. It's a good thing she has such a good music track. As for the rewards for this tournament, well, I'll leave that up to you to discover. Across Lumiose City, there are a ton of colorful screws, and the Racine Construction wants these screws to help with their construction projects, and in return, they will give you some Canari merch. Small keyrings that give you bonuses like experience and money and mega shards throughout the game. They're good to have. And the great thing is that there's more screws than there are available keyrings. But if you find every single screws, there is a secret item, a Canari plush, a big bit of YouTuber merch that shows up in your bedroom at the end of the game. Personally, I preferred Hotel Z without this bit of YouTuber merch, and I'd really prefer it with some of my own, like the City O Light poster. Oh, the walls of Hotel Z would look so good. You know what? Head on over to storekeepertoby.com to get yours today and support both the channel and my fiance Coverfee and I. I'm splitting the profits of the poster with her 50-50, as well as a ton of other cool merch with hidden secrets and Easter eggs in the item listings themselves. It's merch made by a fan of secrets and Easter eggs for fans of secrets and Easter eggs, which if you watch over an hour into this video, you absolutely are. So head on over to storekeepertoby.com and support what I do. This video has taken a long time to make. And I know you're not going to want to miss out because I'm sure Coverfee has snuck some hidden secrets in there that you will find that even I haven't. Storekeepertoby.com, linked in the description. This video has taken an exceptionally long time and a hard amount of work to put together, so I also want to say a huge thank you to the Patreons who make that possible. Thank you everyone who has been a part of this Lore Keeper Toby chapter. We are only just getting started.